So without further ado, I'm just going to welcome or introduce our masterclass speaker, none other than Glenn Lim. He is not only the founder chairman of Breakthrough Academy and Therapy, but he's also a transpersonal psychotherapist. He's very involved in terms of evidence-based work in working with people with early trauma. And he comes with many years of experience in coaching, counseling, and people helping. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the time over to Glenn. Please help me welcome him.
Welcome everyone to tonight's Mind Matters Masterclass. Tonight is going to be exciting. I promise to keep it short. Pardon me if I move quite fast. I just want to dive into the 5 soul wounds. How many of you are familiar with Lise Bourbeau? Obviously, because a lot of our research of the soul wounds are based on her book 2 decades ago. It's called Heal Your Wounds and Find Out Your True Life. I strongly encourage you to get a copy of this. The problem with this publication is that it's all written in French. She's a Canadian therapist, and she actually borrowed from other therapists in Canada, and then she wrote it, condensed it into this distilled version. I would like to refer to some of her quotes tonight. And she made this particular quote that says that everyone who has ever experienced unpleasant experience or unpleasantness in our life on the mental, emotional, and physical level is linked to our soul wounds, especially if you see and recognize patterns of behavior, of mental thinking, of emotions that are unpleasant. Because in a way, it's like a flashback, right? And in a way, it re-triggers your memory. So sometimes when you react to circumstances, to remarks, to people in the present, in the adult form, adulthood, you're not actually reacting to the here and now. You're reacting based on your past, right? And so soul wounds are like that. So it begs us the question then, what is a soul wound? Here's a very quick definition of what a soul wound is. A soul wound is a deep emotional trauma from past experiences, and very often is childhood, that still impacts an individual's self-perception, behaviors, relationships, and often hindering personal growth and healing. So what is childhood there? From what year to what year? Some argue that anywhere below 12 years old. Because once you cross into 13, you become a teen, right? But childhood will be the developmental phase by which you're really absorbing ideas, importing belief systems, formulating value system of the world. So you will be the most vulnerable in terms of developing your core self, your identity, what you believe you are as a person, vis-a-vis your worldview, how you see the world. A soul wound is a deep emotional trauma. And most of the time, if you're talking about below 12 or even below 7 years old, most of that trauma or most of that hurts and wounding come from people you know, caregivers, parents. So what I'm going to do right now is to list out the 5 soul wounds. Are you ready? I use this acronym RABI. And they are sometimes, according to Lise Bourbeau, it is chronological in order, age appropriate even. But let's do a little study of them as I unpack this one by one. So here are the 5 soul wounds, early childhood wounds. Number 1, rejection. Number 2, abandonment. Number 3, humiliation. Number 4, betrayal. Number 5, injustice, unfairness. I put out into like a chart system, and I'm going to show you the 3 clusters by which I've organized them. This was part of my own research study and also my submission in my papers on trauma-induced early childhood development. So the first chart that I'm going to show you has got to do with the origins, the precipitating factors. So on the right, you can see the 5 core soul wounds. Then you have the age of wounding, where it typically happens at what age, by whom. I'm sure some of us would like to know who was the one who did this to me, and now I have this wound for the rest of my life. What are the likely causes? So let's go one by one. Rejection. Now, as I unpack this wounds one by one, its causation, its genesis, I would like you to do some self-reflection. I know many of you earlier on, you indicated that you're here to help people. You may be a practitioner, a professional even. But as I present you these 5 core wounds, I would like you to do some introspection rather than, okay, how can I use this as a tool? How can I help others? Because it all starts with self introspection, self-reflection. And for many of us, we had our own wounds. We may even be ignorant of, unaware, but they're lurking, they're still at work. And because they happened so young, so long ago, when you're at work and you don't even recognize it. And as most practitioners will allude to the fact of effective therapy starting with self-awareness. So let's take a look at number one, age of wounding, 0 to 7 years old. 7 being a very defining age where we begin to have cognitive faculties and begin to think for our own, having a mind of our own, although underdeveloped, not developed fully yet, but at least we are beginning to understand our worldview, what is safe, what is not. So when we say rejection, rejection has got to do with worthiness. And so the likely causes would be like a lack of unconditional love, criticism, maybe you have been overlooked. Who are the main so-called culprits? Well, parents, obviously, caregivers. And even if it's not parents, maybe as you're growing up, you have been rejected by your parents and asked to live with aunts and uncles, or maybe even grandparents. So you begin to develop a sense of, oh, I've been pushed away. I've been overlooked. And maybe I'm not lovable. And so I'm being rejected by my main caregivers. If you borrow and try to study this cross-referencing attachment theory, you begin to develop very insecure sense of self, insecure attachment. Yeah. Whereas the people in my life who are supposed to take care of me, to make me feel safe, they're not around. They push me away. The second is abandonment. It seems like the same as rejection. It touches on the same core worth issues, but abandonment is more of like an absence, a separation from your caregivers, again by parents and caregivers, and occurring also around the same age, 0 to 7 years old. It could likely be caused by maybe a divorce, so one parent is no longer around and moves out, or death of a parent, absence, prolonged separation, neglect even. So I'm not sure how many of you know the story of Dr. Gabor Mate. He rose to recognition, especially during the pandemic, because of his seminal work in trauma work, as well as the movie that he kind of co-produced and starred in, which is The Wisdom of Trauma. He shared a lot about his own growing up and childhood. When even as an infant, a baby who knew nothing during World War II, he's a Jew, by the way, he comes from a lineage of Jews. And he grew up in Auschwitz, or was it Austria? And because of the war and the impending Holocaust against the Jews, which was very frightening and very insecure, the mother, in her desperation, passed him as a baby to a stranger, saying, please take care of him, as she fled the scene. Of course, years later, when they reunited, even though they came back together and were reunited, that initial fear and that initial trauma of being abandoned and let go by his own mother, given away, caused such a wound in him, a wound of abandonment. Later on, we're going to look at how he coped with that abandonment and that separation. By the way, I myself, as I grew up, had the wound of rejection. I was always the black sheep of the family. I was always singled out and compared to my cousins who were doing much better academically, even my younger brother. So I always felt like I couldn't fit in. And they would say things that were very critical. So they would criticize me, and, especially during like dinner gatherings with family. Chinese New Year, remember, we have this reunion dinner. We'll all go there, and all the aunts and uncles will be comparing their son and their daughter's grades, academic results. And I was always being put down. It didn't help that my parents also joined in by saying, yeah, my son, I tell you, he's so stubborn, he's so naughty, very rebellious, and that's why he doesn't do well. I'm sure they had good intent to try to motivate me, but because of that, I felt very rejected. Later on, I'll share with you what I did and how I'll go. Let's go to number 3, humiliation. Humiliation can happen very early, all the way up to 10, years old, what we call our tweenage. So in between or, pre-teen. Again, by parents, this time by peers as well. It could be friends. So now you're exposed to the social element of having friends in school, kindergarten, primary school. And there you have other authority figures like teachers. And so the likely cause will be ridicule. One of the greatest one of the greatest factors that causes low self-esteem, low self-confidence is public ridicule. It's one thing to criticize and ridicule and laugh at someone at a personal level. It's another to put him on stage in front of a class, in front of a group of people, and mock and laugh at him. Because there can be this embarrassment, shame, and bullying is one such factor where you are being taunted, being made a mockery out of at the expense of other people's, or at the expense of your self-worth, right? So I still remembered one of my classmates, and this was in primary school, primary 2, I believe. And after school, we usually had, because back then in primary school, we finish our classes by 1 p.m. And once a week, we'll have this flag lowering ceremony. It was part of a post after school hours assembly period where the principal would address us. And we will all be lining up in the basketball court. These were the days where we didn't really have a multi-purpose hall yet. And there was a flag lowering ceremony where we sing the national anthem. My friend who was just in front of me already signaled to me that he needed to rush to go to the toilet. So when we were all at attention singing the national anthem, Majulah Singapura, he was there fidgeting, moving up and down. Everybody was snickering at him. Finally, when we sang the last note and line to our national anthem, and the school leader signaled to us that we were dismissed, we all turned to look at him, and he had wet his pants. All of us started laughing at him, pointing, and he earned the nickname of Fireman because he wet his pants. His shorts were all soaked through and wet. He picked up his bag and he ran straight for the toilet, and he hid there for 1 full hour. So ashamed, so embarrassed. Finally, a few of us went there and said, "Hey, where are you?" He was still there crying. And from that day onwards, he developed such a sense of unworthiness, embarrassment, and we could roughly tell that he had changed. He was a very extroverted boy, but somehow this embarrassment just filled him. And we were from a mixed school, so the girls would find out about it and start laughing at him. That's even worse. Humiliation. Next, betrayal. Betrayal can now be felt early childhood, 2, 3, 4 years old, up to 12 years old. For those in our Singapore system, in primary school, it's like PSLE, primary 6. Again, by parents, those who are close to us, friends. Friends can betray. And partners. When I say partners, it could be your love interest, boyfriend, girlfriend. I know how many young people now they are getting into steady relationships as young as primary school. So yes, 2 to 12 years old and even beyond. Yeah. And that's why one of the things that I talk a lot in parenting classes and also when I work with youth is sometimes, in secondary school even, it may be too young an age for you to get into a BGR, boy-girl relationship, because you don't have the emotional maturity or maybe even the capacity to understand relationship dynamics. And betrayal is not something we do on purpose at that age. It could be as simple as broken promises, the likely causes. Lies, especially consistent chronic lying. You know how parents can say, yeah, I promise I'll come to you and I'll support you there. I'll follow you. I'll bring you out. Yeah, every week, let's have a play date. Yeah, and we'll go to this place. We'll go to that place, and then never fulfill the promise. That's akin to betrayal, infidelity. So, girl finds out, "Oh yeah, you said that I'm your girlfriend and you're my boyfriend. You say we are best friends forever and we will be committed to each other, boyfriend and girlfriend. But there I see you going out with other girls." And this is so common, right, amongst young people because they don't even understand the definition of boyfriend, girlfriend, and commitment. Or an abuse of trust. Again, it can be from adults, it can be from peers and friends. That is betrayal. Let's go to the last one, injustice. Injustice has got to do with a sense of unfair treatment. It could be from parents. Now we've got siblings, when the dynamic has got to do with sibling rivalry. Authority figures could be teachers, guardians, even religious leaders. So whenever a young person, a child, and they're somehow more sensitive to unjust treatment. For example, favoritism, right? For example, when parents want to motivate their children, and they will say, okay, Titi, our younger brother is a good boy, he's well behaved, I give you ice cream. But you, you better shape up. You be like your brother. You be obedient like him and do your homework. So straight away you got that double standards. Because when you talk about parental unconditional love, it should be equal, right? You love every one of them. But our behaviors can sometimes belie that kind of treatment. And then when you grow up, you're a bit more sensitive to abuse of power even. Those of us who grew up with guardians or foster homes, they will sense this, especially adoption, because there's such a difference in the treatment to their own children, biological children, versus a fostered one. Or sometimes they can even compare. I used to serve and work, volunteer at some orphanages in Singapore, and you can see the difference. Some of them were saying, not fair. Other children got proper families, not fair. And here I am like that. I don't even have a proper home. And they start yearning and pining. Well, young people who have had this soul wound of injustice and unfair treatment, they grow up very rigid. Later on, we'll go through them one by one. With each one of these 5 soul wounds, there are coping mechanisms. A human being needs to be in a state or at least some form of equilibrium before they are able to function in this world. If you have been rejected, abandoned, humiliated, betrayed, and having unfair treatment, we somehow compensate psychologically, behavioral-wise, with some of this mask. A mask is simply a coping strategy, a coping mechanism within us. And so we adopt a role and a function to cope with the wound. Let's start with rejection. The rejection's mask type is a fugitive. What's a fugitive? A fugitive lurks in the shadows and is always like an outcast, never really finding a place to settle, right? So some of the maladaptive behaviors, the negative behaviors, include withdrawal symptoms, like withdrawn from social settings. They're always hiding in the shadows. They don't like to be the center of attraction. And very often, because they feel a sense of low self-worth. Remember, rejection means they have been overlooked, they have been pushed away, rejected, like rejected goods over someone else. For example, the parents could have said, oh, your brother is better, and because of that, I will give him this and that, and you don't have that. So you feel rejected. So you're always seeking validation to fill up that void. Some of us can, like for me, certainly, I was into a performance trap. I was always performing, always trying to outdo people, always trying to be the smarter one, trying to do better, trying to do more, to win the approval, maybe even the affirmation of other people. And once people clap their hands and say, wow, good job, Glenn, you're doing such a good job, you're solid, I feel validated. The problem is that there's nothing wrong in affirmation, but I was seeking it so much that it was just this mask. And I was living such a double life. I was so hungry for approval, right? And not only that, I myself became overly self-critical. I'll be criticizing myself. I will never do enough and never good enough. You see, that kind of faulty self-worth. So my self-concept as a person was totally distorted. I always felt that I was never good enough, even though I achieved so much. Yet I would say, not enough, not enough. I keep climbing, keep winning awards, keep being affirmed. So I had a very critical spirit. Not only was I critical about myself and my achievements, I was critical of others as well, because I don't want others to do better than me. So I would tear people down, I would gossip, and there was so much malice behind. I never was able to praise people. I was never able to say, hey, good job, well done, and let them have the limelight even. Because I was so unworthy. I was so unworthy of love. Relationally, I would also reject people. Can you see the self-sabotage effect? Because by first rejecting other people, that will protect me from being rejected. A person suffering with this wound of rejection will have this kind of behaviors. Now, obviously, I'm generalizing. And Lisa Bobo did mention that each one of us can have up to 3, 4, even all 5 wounds at work at the same time. Let's go to the second one, abandonment. Abandonment has a mask of the pleaser or a dependent, overly dependent person. Why a pleaser? Because an abandoned child is insecure. And his issue is loneliness. Being alone is a big fear and even a trigger. So he becomes overly clingy as a compensation. He's always clinging on to people and pleasing people. Most of the relationships end up being codependent, even manipulative. And when there's a slightest hint that people are going to leave, oh, you can adopt a few techniques like gaslighting. Oh, you always leave me. I'm always the victim. So they play victim all the time. They feel their greatest fear is being left alone. Slightest hint of neglect, like in a marriage relationship, the husband, if the wife is having this wound of abandonment, she feels so insecure. She can't wait for the husband to come and she's texting, calling, where are you? Where are you? It's already past midnight. Where are you? They also have a scarcity mentality. What's a scarcity mentality? It's not enough, right? The world is not enough. I also link this to what we call the orphan spirit. An orphan spirit is left to his own devices to fend for himself. So every little thing they hoard, they scream, they try to save because they're afraid that it will be lost. Someone suffering from abandonment will also have issues with changes. They're very slow to change. They don't want to change. They're afraid of changes because changes bring about uncertainty, and uncertainty will certainly mean some loss of the past familiarity. Independence is not something that a person with abandoned wound will be comfortable with. So, like I said, they're very codependent. They rely a lot on people. All right. They can be very good placators. You know what I mean? Placators means they will please you, over please you. They try to serve you. Out of the blue, they'll buy you things. So all these little gifts are meant to secure your closeness, your favoritism over them. Let's go to humiliation. The mask of humiliation is the narcissist. And it's like an arrogant front, veneer of defensiveness, know it all. Because remember, he has been humiliated before and he's going to make sure that he's never going to be embarrassed again, humiliated or shamed. So what he does is he overcompensates in the area of being perfectionist. Not only that, a person who suffered humiliation before seldom takes personal responsibility. You always push the blame to someone else. Because the moment fingers are pointed towards him, where he is responsible and he needs to take ownership, he's afraid that he's being mocked at or ridiculed again or criticized. So his greatest fear is criticism, judgment, failure. He cannot fail. The moment he's failing at his work, in his studies in school, he becomes very vulnerable, very susceptible to people's pointing of fingers or even criticizing him. So weaknesses are meant to be hidden. He would not want to share his shortcomings. This makes him a very, like I said, an exterior of arrogance, and he doesn't disclose a lot of personal stuff. He's not transparent enough. And obviously, he will struggle in relationships because relationships require some kind of vulnerability. Without vulnerability, there can be no trust. And he suffers from shame as well. The moment he feels vulnerable, like he's going to be found out that he made a mistake, he's going to quickly blame shift, turn the cards around, maybe even the game play to say that it's not his fault. And he'll blame others even before the issue is being addressed or confronted. So he's very good at that. Someone who's humiliated before has a tough exterior. Betrayal. The mask of a betrayal is a very over-cautionistic, guarded stance. This person is so cautious about everything. He's afraid of playing the victim. So even though, we say victimhood there, very often he's very resentful of people. Difficulty in trusting. Trust is a big issue. And like I said earlier on, all relationships require trust. It's the glue. It's the currency by which we function. So if you're not going to be trusting of people, you're always suspicious, cynical, it's very hard to sustain a relationship. Isn't that true? Right? So he's guarded because he doesn't want to be betrayed anymore. And it's highly, what we call hypersensitive to promises that are being broken. Broken promises. Oh, if you know of someone who's like that, every word means he weighs it heavily on you. He's going to put it on you. Because the moment you say something like, okay, I'm going to do this for you, he's going to check out, she's going to check out your behavior, whether it's consistent to your words. So you're always walking on eggshells around someone like that. He's afraid of betrayal again, being taken advantage. So before he's being taken advantage, he's going to have this wall, right? He's going to say, he's going to put up a lot of standards for you. I know of a lady who couldn't get into a relationship for many, many years because all her relationships, she would sabotage them by having such high standards, ridiculous standards that there's no way a man could fulfill them. She would do what we call testing behavior. She would literally test the man, okay, whether he would pay for the meal, send her home. It's almost like a checklist, and it's so guarded. I mean, all the men all got scared of her and they fled from her. They said, wow, this girl is so difficult, high maintenance. But she was just going through a checklist that seemed to be really unrealistic. Betrayal. Last one, injustice, unfairness. The person who has suffered from this wound of injustice is very rigid, almost rebellious. So some of the behaviors would include cynicism, very cynical, very skeptical, resentful. The person has a resentful spirit, especially when you hurt or trigger him or her. Almost perfectionistic in everything that he or she wants to do, right? So rigid structure, they want to be in control. The reason why they set up so many points of structure and systems is so that they can be in charge or be in control of the situation, so as to prevent future uncertainties, right? So his or her main trigger will be unfairness. Unfairness towards himself, or he may see and spot out unfairness outside, double standards, and he'll get angry. I know of someone who always gets triggered whenever he sees other families, other siblings get treated unfairly. And even as an adult, he would comment. He would not be silent about unfair treatment. And on the outward, he may even look like someone who's a bit more righteous and care for the underdog. But really behind is a re-triggering of his own sense of injustice. So what you will do as a parent, can you imagine he's got 3 kids, but in parent support group, he will go around scolding other parents in the same support group by saying, how can you treat your younger child with favor? How about the older one? And he started scolding and all the other parents got afraid of him. Like, what's wrong with this guy, right? Yeah, that's because he can't stand injustice. He can smell hypocrisy, pretentiousness, and or being controlled, right? So most of his maladaptive emotions will be anger, and he will start a revolt easily. Guys, this chart talks about the coping and trigger factors. Shall I end with this chart, which is how to heal from them? So with rejection, and I put it in a very distilled summary here, I think self-acceptance is important. When you learn to accept even your flaws, even your sense of knowing your core personhood, learning to accept that, yes, you had a wound before, and also to help set boundaries learning to meet your own needs instead of getting validation from others all the time. It's okay that you don't meet certain standards. You are still worthy of love, acceptance, right? Number two, abandonment. Letting go, trusting self, healthy independence with others. Remember, the wound of abandonment has got to do with others leaving, like separating from you. And because you're so clingy, you've been abandoned before, you're looking and you're hanging on for dear life to people. That's called codependency. So learning to let go, learning independence is an important aspect of healing. For humiliation, self-compassion, because you were humiliated before in front of people or public, people got to know and you were embarrassed. Have some compassion for the inner child. Letting go of perfectionism, embracing imperfections. Self-love, some people call it. Betrayal, learn to forgive. Learn to release forgiveness. As we all know, the definition of forgiveness is not letting people go, but letting yourself go from the imprisonment of holding on to grudges. So learn to release forgiveness. Also set up boundaries, yes, but not over-controlling to the sense that you're suspicious and not trusting of people, especially for relationships that you care for. Because without trust, it's very difficult to have intimacy. So some people, this type of people with a betrayal wound, they will normally, in their language, they will normally say things like, I can never trust anymore. Trust is a big issue for me. Can I trust you? Can you be trusted? So they always use this calling card. I like to help them by rephrasing or replacing trust with courage. Because really, it's not about trusting people. It's about having the courage to put yourself out there and learn to trust people despite your past wounds. That's the true essence of learning to trust people again. Lastly, injustice. Sometimes you need to stand up for your rights, yes, but not in a way that's overbearing to other people and being personal about it. Self-empowerment is important. Learning to have that voice, but using it constructively to make transformation and change happen for the betterment of others, for society, for example. Some of the best people to lead this kind of justice, sustainability movements, go green, eco-friendly, save the dog, save the planet, Gaia, they all had this wound before, this sense of injustice, right? But they've learned to transform that pain, that hurt into something constructive for the world today, and doing things to save the planet, etc. And that means that they will need to have compassion, not just for themselves, but for the people that they are advocating for the needs that they're advocating. So this is how to heal. And I put them all into a summary chart for you. Would you want your free summary chart? Let me move on because of time. I've still got 1 or 2 more things to share before I close up this part. I want to talk a bit about collective trauma. These 5 soul wounds can be scaled up to communities, a collection of people that share the same wounds. You know that? So let's take a look at some of them. These are examples we all know of. Let's talk about the Jews in the World War II Holocaust. Tell me which soul wound has affected this group of people during World War II. If you know the story, the Jews were persecuted. They were hunted down by the Nazi regime, Adolf Hitler, almost in a very unfair way. Which soul wound? Someone said injustice. Yeah. What else? All, yeah. Okay. No doubt injustice is one of them. But the chief core soul wound of the Jews back then was abandonment. Do you know that they call out for help? Firstly, they are a displaced group of people. They don't even have a country of their own back then. And they called out help. The United Nations, the US ignored them for a good long while, right? And nobody dared to come in to help while they were being persecuted. 9 million Jews, my friends. 9 million Jews. They were abandoned and left to their own. They had to fend for themselves. They were helpless. Let's talk about America, the blacks. Do you know that they have a historical collective trauma of being slaves? Tell me, what soul wound did they get traumatized in? As a community of blacks taken out from Africa, and when they were in America, they only could serve as slaves. Humiliation, yes. What else? Their core soul wound that affected them up till today, because it's a collective wound that has repercussions down the generations. We call that transgenerational trauma. What was that? Injustice. I mean, aren't they human? Just because of their color, they are treated differently? That's injustice. Guys, how many of you are from Singapore? What is the collective trauma of Singapore? Make a guess. When Singapore gained independence, 1965, was it a very smooth transition? Was it a celebrated event? It was one filled with pain. Our independence came about through rejection. Malaysia, any Malaysians here? Sorry, this is the history, okay? We've got you to blame. You rejected us. Tunku Rahman rejected us. And our founding father, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, was so heartbroken. Now, guys, I told you earlier on, each wound, each trauma has a consequence down the generations, down the timeline. Until today, one might be saying, wow, Singapore, you're doing so well from third world country to first world country in just 3 generations. The price we have to pay is a performance trap. We are one of the most stressed nations in the world. Sure, we're doing well, we're affluent, but at what cost? And what price are we paying? I had my own cousins who are now migrated to Australia, and they're raising kids there. They shake their heads whenever they talk about the Singapore education system, the stress, the pressure. And I wonder if it was because we are still out to prove our worth. As a small nation, cut off and rejected. And the pain felt by our then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew when he cried on national TV. And the resolve, I mean, you check out all his old YouTube videos, it says, we will come back. We will prove to the world, to the West, who we really are. And to today, we're still proving our worth. Make sense? We call this national trauma. As a nation, we bear the brunt of a past wound collectively. I'm going to end off with this slide. How to treat your soul wounds. How to heal them. 5 steps. Number 1, reflect on the 5 soul wounds. And that's why I'm giving you the summary chart. Do some self-reflection over the 5. Like I said earlier on, you may not just have one wound. A typical integration of those wounds would be about 3. Maybe for some of us, all 5. Yeah, but there will always be one dominant one that stands out. So when you reflect, start to recall personal experiences from your past. One way of doing that is to look at all the significant memories of your past, especially the negative ones, with your parents, what did they do, and link them to the soul wound. Did they reject you? Did they abandon you? Right? Number 3, look for recurring patterns and themes. One incident does not make a wound, because human beings are creatures of patterns and habits. We revolve around soul wounds, and the wounding that is not healed will always come back. We will re-experience it, we will be re-triggered and re-traumatized all over again, and therefore reinforcing this open wound. Now, I want to make a distinction. A wound is something that is an open sore. You still feel pain because it's a wound. A scar is a healed wound. You will have past memories. You can't erase your memories, but they no longer feel painful. That's a healthy scar. A scar tissue is one like that. It's a good memory. but there will not be any negative emotions. Okay, so that's the difference. Number 4, identify your dominant emotions that are matched or accompanying those wounds. Because with each wound, you may have a dominant emotion. For some of us, it's anger, unfairness. For some of us, it's really sad, and you feel like a victim. You feel like nobody wants you. You feel alone. Identify it, write it down, reflect upon it. And then upon doing that, acknowledge. Guys, one of the most important things you can do for your inner wounded child is to acknowledge rather than say, don't feel that way. Stop crying. Yeah, get over it. You're so old already. Don't do that. Because when you do that, you're not giving yourself self-compassion. Dr. Gabor Mate's work is now classified under a method called compassionate inquiry. As you go back to reflect and inquire of your hurt child, your little child who is hiding in a corner, in the dark shadows, so afraid, so full of fear, you acknowledge by saying, yes, that has happened to you before. Because acknowledgement opens the way up for self-acceptance and forgiveness. The worst thing you can do is denial. Oh, it never happened. Oh, it was a small thing. You minimize the pain. Because your inner child is going to say, you don't understand. And I'm still hurting. So when we do self-care or when we do self-compassion work, it's very important to validate the emotions, validate the episode. All right? I'm going to leave with this. One of my main modalities that I've developed is called EDT, Energy Defragmentation Therapy. And this is one of my chief vehicles of helping you resolve your psycho-emotional fragmentation, because like it or not, you're fractured and internally you're separated from self when you are hurt, especially when you carry a soul wound from the past. And it helps you restore equilibrium for optimal living again. Because hurt people not only hurt other people, you're also going to hurt your future. And you are so predictable as a person who is hurt that even in the following years ahead, you're just going to carry that wound and the accompanied behaviors and results. That way, you're very predictable as a person. One of the things you need to do if you want to move forward, if you want to be free from your past, is to resolve it and to heal it. And with that, later on, I think Yiqian is going to pump in the link to my next class. It's a 1-day basic training certification, EDT. I think we have one more run this year in December. I only run this like 3 times a year at max. And it comes with a free consultation and psychotherapy as well with me. Okay, so stay tuned for the link that is going to be given to you.